Hey everybody, I'm your host, Aseer the Geopolitics. Thank you for coming through once again. We out here in Andalusia. It's a little overcast today, but things is always pleasure in the sun. A lot of wild stuff going on. A lot of people hit me up about some of the major events that have been happening. So of course, I take notes or whatever, but I'm gonna try to go off the cuff real quick to address some of it. One of the things that's happening now is if anybody remembers a book, for people who still actually read books, there was a book that came out a long time ago called Atlas Shrugged. And in this book, it talked about basically that everybody in the so-called government that was running things at the time, they needed to create a subsidy because the people were going to vote them all out. So what they started to do is they came up with a plan to dry dock and landlock the people. So what they did was they started blowing up bridges and roads and basically targeting the infrastructure of the country. So this has now played out in real life, where life has become art, or life imitates art, or vice versa, where they try to blame the collapsing of a bridge, a whole bridge that's basically been up for almost a little over 150 years. They blame that all on a crackhead, right, who allegedly was smoking crack at the base of the bridge, and then I don't know how the crack could light a steel girder, and then somehow or another the entire bridge basically collapsed, and they put it all on this homeless crackhead person that nobody knows where he's at. So that to me was fishy from the door. Then they started going through the situation where they started doing mass cancellations for air flights. Then what started happening was they got that doctor, the Asian doctor, that they basically assaulted and beat up on the United flight. So these things are being done. Then today I just got a clip about how one of the I think it's I-20 in DeKalb County, the whole half of the lane basically sank down into the ground. So they're basically, again, targeting their infrastructure. They're striving to destroy it or make it very hard for people to travel from place to place. That's because they want to reduce the amount of people who have the ability to go from one space to the next, because then they can give other people intel about what's happening generally throughout the entire country. So this was also put out in what they call the Northwoods Act. And in the Northwoods Act, they talked about blowing up their own infrastructure, blowing up government buildings, things like that, which they did with Timothy McVeigh when they used him as a patsy to blow up the Oklahoma City thing, or they used the so-called Arabs that they trained in Saudi Arabia to blow up the planes that they say flew up into the World Trade Center, but we know that was a scheduled demolition. So all of these things are contributing to what I was talking about a couple of tapes ago in a cycle called the theater of war. What we are in is theater. And what theater is, when you come into global politics, is a way for people to engender people to be a certain way based upon how they want to marginalize the populace. Another thing that people don't understand about war is that war is like the biggest real estate scam that you could ever perpetuate on people, because when you go into a place, let's say like Syria, right, and then you bomb these people basically back to the Stone Age, what happens now is that you have conglomerate companies that come in through humanitarian aid like the UN, and then what they do is they start to deal and start to target the survivors, right? So then they get the survivors into what they call safe zones or green zones, right? And then when they get them in these green zones, what they start to do is they do blood tests and stuff on them. And then when they find out that they have certain traits, genetics and stuff that they need for them based on the plasma intake or whatever, then what they do is they take those people, and those people mysteriously disappear. Like the 64,000 so-called black women and children that have disappeared, all just in the northern the northern coast of the United States. So you mean to tell me over 64,000 people, 64,000 children, women, right, young boys, just happen to just disappear, and the only thing that the chief of police in Washington, in the DMV area, said, well, the only thing we could suggest is that you tell your children to stay inside. What do you think they telling you? What do you think they saying when they say that? If I pay somebody to protect my children, and then the person that I'm paying comes and tells me, well, I'm gonna take your money, but there's no real way I can protect your children. So the best thing to do is you protect and keep them inside. Then that means he might be down with it. He might be down with the human trafficking, because that's what all this stuff is. I don't know if you know. So with all of that being said, we have to ask ourselves, well, where are these 64,000 people going, and why all of a sudden are they just gone? Like, what are they doing with all these black people? Well, what you should always do is check the market, check the NASDAQ and all of that, and look where melanin is right now in terms of how much is actually being garnered. It was $3.14 at the beginning of the year. Now it's up to $3.53 a gram. You understand? That's more than palladium right now, man. That's more than what they using to build nuclear bombs. So the question is, where they getting all this melanin from? Where they getting it from? Well, I know where I think they're getting it from. But however, the problem is, what I know, what you know is irrelevant. How come there's nothing in the so-called black or conscious community or any type of melanated community that's actively addressing this seriously? How come they will tell you, oh, well, it's better for you to, just keep your head down and marginalistically go with everything that's happening, instead of you trying to actively stand up and find out who's kidnapping your children? But again, I digress, and we'll go into this. So much. So one of the other things I seen in that, we were talking about the whole thing with Syria. Now, the thing with Syria is this is all being orchestrated by an organization called Genie Oil. And Genie Oil is owned by Cheney, is owned by Rothschild, is owned by, who else is one of these bastards? Cheney, Rothschild, I got them on here. Yeah, Cheney, Rothschild, Rupert Murdoch, James Woolsey, who was the ex-head of the CIA under Obama, and then Bill Richardson, who is the governor of New Mexico, as well as Harry Summers, who was the Secretary of Treasury. So, not to mention 26 other major players that's in that whole thing that live and subsist upon the misery and human suffering. These people who are actually in the government now, these people are basically trying to establish a pipeline that goes, again, all the way from Afghanistan down into Syria, all the way down into Iraq, everything. So what they're doing is they're consolidating how many bombs and stuff they drop on it. So this plan to target Syria was a part of, like I said back before, was a part of this thing called the Plan for a New American Century. And when they're trying to establish United States homogeny and empire throughout the world. So this pipeline thing is really about to go down. But in order for them to continue it, they have to get the permission from the Syrian government, who was Assad. But Assad just allegedly gassed his people. And then right behind that now, what do? They get this dude Trump to drop the so-called mother of all bombs that happens to be the same acronym as Moab, right? That they ain't been using since before the war. So again, when I say it's a theater, he basically dropped a bomb on a place where there was no people at. You understand what I'm saying? And then in that was basically to budge Russia to kind of act like they were going to be the ones to try to block them from going in there. So on top of all of that, Putin then sends a private communique to Kim Jong-il and basically letting him know that this is basically a two-pronged attack. So Kim Jong-il and them done created a whole pact now, what they're referring to as the South Pacific Union, in which now Russia is backing them under the table, as well as China. And this is all behind over the money that's backing up the BRIC Union. But at the same token, the BRIC Union thing, which is a union of consolidated so-called states or countries that have agreed that they are not going to use the dollar to subsidize their national GDP. So what that means is that the dollar is being marginalized. So just as I said, in that situation now, you have Atlas Shrugged, where the infrastructure, they done targeted the infrastructure. They blame the whole collapsing on this bridge on a crackhead. They did excessive flight cancellations, and then they're physically assaulting people on planes. So the underlying thing is that we don't want you to travel no more. We don't want you to move no more. We want to keep you stationary, so that way when whatever pops off, we have the ability to herd you up easily. right? On top of that, now we also had 2 summary executions. Everybody talking about Charlie Murphy, bless the dead, but ain't nobody talking about the fact that the first ever Muslim judge, who happened to be a so-called black woman, Asiatic woman, found dead 2 times they found her dead in the Hudson River, right? Right? Then the other brother, now that's a man now, that was in New York. Now in Chicago, one of the judges, this so-called black judge, walks out of his house, get ready to go to work or whatever, and somebody pop him 9 times, right on his front porch. Now, what is the through line between both assassinations? Well, one, they both Asiatics, right? Undeclared or whatever. 2, they both judges, right? So now, the new shit now, I guess, is that judges is getting popped. But it seemed like the only ones that's getting popped is the black judges. So that's showing you the double standard within the situation, right? But on top of that, they both were very direct in prosecuting dirty cops. There were 2 cases on their dockets where they were dealing with how to punish these pigs that they found basically drug trafficking, and one of them was found raping a 13-year-old girl. So if you don't understand what I understand, I look at it like they're basically targeting these 2 people specifically. 1, because they're Asiatic. 2, because they already look at them as traitors to their own people. So they're looking at it as a trifecta. It's a twofer for them. So 1, they killing the niggas, and 2, they killing traitors, right? So the question now is, where's the investigation? Where's the mechanism in the so-called black or conscious communities that can investigate these things? Just like what happened to Dr. Sebi. Ain't nobody talking about that still. I just seen a clip with some dude purchased Dr. Sebi products, and it swole his head up, where he looked like a gray, like his head was like totally swollen up for taking the products. So that let me know, the Queen told me when he died, the Queen was like, I don't think people should mess with the products no more, because we don't know who's doing this stuff with it now. And boom, right after that, this dude come with the swole head. So this is what they do. They get rid of our teachers, our scholars, the people who can actually make a difference. And because we don't have nothing in place in our own community infrastructure, we can't protect or even get to the bottom of how this stuff happens, right? So then we just left to, we left to the same people who doing the killing to set up the investigation. And you think that's gonna work? We have seen proof that everything concerning melanated people in this country is totally biased, is totally unlawful, and not to mention that nobody's getting prosecuted or hurt for it. You know how many people have been killed by police just in 2017? And the first thing they say, well, what about black on black crime? Well, what about white on white crime? How come nobody talk about that? White people killing each other and everybody else all day, every day. But ain't nobody going to them marginalizing their crime to their color. Crime is crime, man. Whether it's a nigga committing a crime, whether it's a cracker committing a crime, whether it's a president committing a crime, whether it's a homeless person committing a crime is a crime universal. It don't have a color. It has a stigma now based upon the color, because they've marginalized that to a certain group of people that everybody knows ain't the criminal base. If we talk about organized and political crimes and crime in general, there has been no greater crime than the forced denationalization and genocidal practices of all European Western society cultures and countries. Like I said, France to this day is receiving ransom from 64 different African countries. And if they don't pay them money, they will go in there and kill everybody in the government and kill everybody damn near in the country, force the forced migration and move everybody out, so that way people like Genie Oil and the UN Humanitarian Aid and all the other redevelopment real estate groups can go in there, buy up the land for no money, right? And then move European Caucasian colonists in there, right? And then the only black people that work there is going to be the help. This is what's happening. We are in a totally marginalized society where anybody that speaks anything of truth to diagnose the problem is actually the problem. But if everybody wants to go with it, then it's all good. What else we got? Yeah, so we got the judges, right? Cool. We also got Moab, the theater of war, the prep for North Korea with the bombs. What else we talking about? Another thing that went under people's radar was this movie that came out called Assassin's Creed. And in Assassin's Creed, that was a whole different thing, but that was totally based upon why we're in the situation we're in now. And we're in the situation we're in now is because what happened, everybody said, well, why did the Moors fall? And how did the Moors fall? Why the Spanish was powerful to them? They weren't as powerful as them. What really happened was Queen Isabella made a deal with Boabdil, who was the king of Granada at the time, who was his uncle, who was the Moor who had the actual title to the land. And because the Spaniards had grown up under the so-called Moors for over 900 years, right? They created little fiefdoms where certain Christian powers would work for the Moors to keep the Castilian and Aragonese Spanish at bay. So it got to the point where as things started to go down, after El Zagal sold Isabella the right, she then filed a document at what we now call Geneva at The Hague, and that was called the Te Deum. And this was done on February 14th, I'm going to say either the 14th or the 16th, 1491. So after she bought it, what happened was the Moors of the Andalusia dominions, because they grew up and grew these Spanish people up under them for all of these years, they started to look at the Spanish aspect of them as being more connected than the traditional Islamic Moroccan Moors of the greater Maghreb al-Aqsa, what we call the Al-Awasim, which represents the greater frontier of the Maghreb. So in that, they was like, well, look, we speak Spanish. We're actually kind of more Spanish speaking than we are Morabic speaking. And these Moors from the western reaches of the empire is a little bit more about it than we are up here, because we done grown up on all this luxury. So you know what? We're going to pass it off to our Spanish cousins. And then we're going to let the Islamic Moors basically fend for themselves. And that's what's been happening. But the Divine Creed says that we are not supposed to pick anybody else over our own blood. And our own blood is the very essence of what they're doing this thing for. So when we speak about, like I said, the excessive killings, the Atlas Shrugged situation, the dropping of the Moab Bomb, this whole theater of war that they're doing, and the fact that this dude Trump is about to be indicted or basically being brought on charges for treason because they done now found a smoking gun to connect him basically to the Russians. And all of this is now being ousted right around the time now that they're about to basically formally declare that Israel is going to be a rogue nation, because they need Israel out the picture now too. Because now that they got the Saudis, you got to remember the Saudi Arabia was always backed by the British. So that is the Arabic version of Israel. So they are there to totally destabilize everything through Wahhabism. And that Wahhabism is really a secular form of Catholicism. Because all of those people are crypto Jews. They all working for the Jesuits. You understand? So as much as, you know, I give respect and, you know, we miss Charlie Murphy, I also think that we need to start to pay more attention to the political killings that happen and are continuously happening in our community. Because if we don't, then any of us can be targeted. Anybody is game. What you also need to do, or what we also should start to do, is actually start to pay more attention to our own individual communities. You want to see something change in your community? Start with your block. Get everybody on your block together and agree to start to practice group economics of just the people on your block. There's other things that we can do to build on that too. But it always works together when we consolidate ourselves into a power base. And that can't happen if I'm thinking that I'm this, and he's thinking he's that, and she's basically working for the white man, and he's working for this one and that one, and everybody's working against each other, but everybody we working with is working together. Because that's the petri dish that we're in right now, brothers and sisters. So again, if anybody else has anything to say, wants to email me about some of the topics that we spoke about today, email me at houseofl@hotmail.com. Let me do one more quick check. Oh yeah, I'm gonna also try to do an atrocity account. So as we are closing out now, I want to just give some things for people to check out, because the new British colonial system that they are educating people with over in Europe They have totally whitewashed and got rid of all the colonial history of the atrocities they did. So if you want to check them out, do the knowledge. Don't ever let somebody who genocidally came and destroyed your culture make you forget what happened. Okay? So one, these are the British atrocities of the empire, British East India Company. You need to check or research the the Jallianwala Bagh massacre in 1919, the Iraqi rebellion in 1929, which was the massacre against the Kurds, the Indian partition in 1947 when they killed over 56,000 people, men, women, and children, the Mau Mau massacre, where they basically put 1.5 million Kenyans, including so-called Barack Obama's father, in concentration camps. And lastly, the Indian famine that Churchill basically said that they needed to starve the Indians out because they were too proud of a people and they were too dark. So again, they just put Churchill on a $5 pound out there. So it lets you know that white supremacy, or what we understand, is alive and well, and the only thing that can kill it is knowledge of yourself. Peace.